Aiden had always been used to danger. As a soldier in the United Earth Federation, he was trained to handle the worst situations, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to face on the Caribbean homeworld. The peacekeeping mission had started like any other, with Aiden and his team sent to monitor a diplomatic event between the United Earth Federation and the Caribbean Empire. But when the royal ship of the Caribbean monarchy suddenly lost control, everything changed. The ship plummeted from the sky, crashing into the thick forest below. The ground shook with the force of the impact, and smoke rose from the wreckage. It was clear. This was no ordinary crash. The royals were in danger. Aiden's heart raced as his military instincts kicked in. He was trained for combat, but this was something else. This wasn't just about fighting enemies, this was about saving lives. Without wasting a moment, Aiden signaled his team to stay back while he moved ahead. The smoke was thick, and the flames from the wreckage spread quickly. But Aiden didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the wreck, determined to find survivors. Inside the burning remains of the ship, the air was thick with the stench of smoke and melted metal. As Aiden pushed through the debris, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. There, lying unconscious near the wreckage, was the Princess Virith, the heir to the Caribbean throne. Her golden armor was dented, her skin bruised, and her breathing was shallow. Aiden's training took over again. He knelt beside her and checked her pulse. She was alive, but barely. His mind raced. The Caribbean people would never forgive him if he let their princess die, but there was no time to think about that. With incredible care, he lifted her in his arms and started moving back toward the clearing where his team had set up a safe zone. As he carried her, Aiden heard the distant growls of the creatures that roamed the Caribbean forests, their eyes glowing in the shadows. He didn't dare look back, knowing that if he slowed down, they'd be upon him in an instant. His breathing quickened as the weight of the princess grew heavy in his arms. But Aiden didn't stop. The sound of heavy footsteps behind him sent a jolt of panic through his chest, and he quickened his pace. It was then that he heard the growl, a deep, guttural sound that sent chills down his spine. The creatures were close. Too close. A sudden rustling came from the bushes to his right, and without thinking, Aiden drew his weapon ready to fight. But just as quickly, he heard the voice of his commander, Sergeant Kayla, calling out from the clearing. "Aiden, get to the zone now!" He didn't waste a moment. He turned and ran, ignoring the danger around him, focused only on getting Princess Virith to safety. The growls faded into the background, and Aiden felt his body burning with exhaustion. But he didn't slow down. He wouldn't stop until he was sure she was safe. When Aiden finally reached the safety zone, he laid the princess on the ground, his hands shaking. He knew he had done everything he could, but he also knew that the worst wasn't over. The Caribbean monarchy was powerful, and they didn't show weakness. If the princess died, the Caribbeans would seek revenge. There was no question about it. Aiden's life and the lives of his team would be on the line. The team quickly began their medical checks on Princess Virith. The medic, Dr. Callis, knelt beside her and started assessing her injuries. "She's alive, but we need to get her back to the palace. There's only so much we can do here." Aiden nodded, trying to steady his breath. He had saved her, but the cost of saving her was only just beginning to reveal itself. As the team prepared for transport, the skies overhead began to clear. A strange silence hung in the air, the aftermath of the crash settling over them. Aiden had no idea what the future held, but he knew this. He had just saved the Caribbean princess, and whatever came next would change his life forever. Minutes later, a transport ship arrived, and they lifted Princess Virith onto the craft. Aiden followed, his mind still racing, thinking about the dangers they had just escaped. But there was another danger he hadn't accounted for, the one he was about to face when he entered the Caribbean palace. As the transport ship lifted off the ground, Aiden could see the green expanse of the Caribbean world stretch out beneath them. He had no idea what awaited him at the palace, but one thing was certain. His life had just been tied to the Caribbean royal family, and with that, his mission had only just begun. Aiden sat silently in the transport ship as it soared above the Caribbean landscape, the distant mountains looming on the horizon. The journey to the royal palace was quiet, but his mind was far from peaceful. He had saved Princess Vereth, an act that in human terms would have been worthy of recognition. But in Caribbean culture it was far more than that. It felt like something far greater, though Aiden wasn't sure exactly what. The princess, still unconscious, lay on a bed secured at the rear of the ship. Dr. Callis, the medic who had been part of their team, stayed by her side, making sure her condition didn't worsen. Aiden glanced over at the doctor every now and then, but his thoughts remained on the unknown. He couldn't shake the sense that he had just crossed into a world that would never fully accept him, no matter how hard he tried. The ship's engines hummed softly and Aiden leaned back in his seat trying to get some rest. But every time he closed his eyes, images of the crash, the creatures lurking in the forest, and the princess's lifeless body flashed before his mind. He couldn't forget what he had done. He couldn't forget what this meant. He had saved her, and now there was no turning back. As the ship descended toward the royal palace, Aiden looked out the window. The Caribbean capital was even more breathtaking than he had imagined. Towering spires of silver and gold reached toward the sky, surrounded by lush gardens and crystal-clear rivers. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen, alien, yet strangely beautiful. There was a strange elegance to it, something that suggested both power and ancient wisdom. The Caribbeans had been a proud and advanced civilization for centuries, but Aiden felt like an outsider in their world. The transport ship landed gracefully, its engines humming to a stop on a platform just outside the palace's main entrance. Soldiers in dark, intricately designed armor waited for them. They were tall, imposing figures with sharp, angular features that spoke of generations of strength. They didn't say a word as they helped move the princess from the ship and onto a stretcher. Aiden hesitated for a moment before following the procession. He knew this wasn't just a simple rescue. He had saved a royal member, and the Caribbean royal family wasn't known for their warmth toward outsiders, let alone humans. He was a guest here, but he was also an anomaly, a human, and the Caribbeans didn't easily accept others into their midst. As they entered the palace, Aiden was struck by the sheer size and grandeur of the place. The walls were lined with elegant tapestries depicting battles and heroic figures from Caribbean history. The floors were made of polished stone, the surfaces gleaming in the dim light. There was a coldness to the palace, a chill that came from the many years of power and pride that filled its halls. And yet, there was also a warmth, like the heat of a fire that had been burning for centuries. They reached a large chamber where Princess Vereth was gently laid down on a raised platform. The room was filled with attendants, each one dressed in flowing robes that shimmered with the light of the palace's glowing crystals. They moved quickly, preparing the princess for treatment, as Aiden stood back, unsure of his place in all of this. The alien world felt both beautiful and intimidating. It wasn't long before Queen Solara entered the room. She was as imposing as the rest of the royal family, with silver skin that shimmered like moonlight and hair that cascaded down her back in waves of deep blue. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, regarded Aiden with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something that Aiden couldn't quite place. "Human," Queen Solara said, her voice soft but commanding. "You have saved my daughter. For that, you have my gratitude." Her gaze lingered on Aiden, her expression unreadable. "But tell me this, why did you do it?" Aiden straightened, unsure of what to say. The Queen's presence was overwhelming, and her question had a weight to it that made his words feel small. But he couldn't remain silent. "I couldn't. Just leave her there," he said. "She was in danger. I'm not sure what the customs are here, but where I come from, when someone needs help, you don't just walk away." Queen Solara's lips curved into a slight smile, though it was fleeting. She nodded slowly as though processing his words. "You are a strange one, human. Most would have seen her as a symbol, not a person. But you treated her as an individual. Perhaps you are not like the others." Aiden wasn't sure whether that was a compliment or not, but before he could respond, the Queen continued, "The Caribbean people are not easily swayed. We do not trust outsiders, especially not those who come from another world. But you have done something no one else could do. You saved my daughter." Her gaze softened, and for the first time, Aiden saw something other than the icy queen of legend. There was a flicker of something warmer in her eyes, something that made him feel like a guest. No, like someone invited into her very home. "You are not just a soldier, Aiden," Queen Solara said, her voice low and thoughtful. "You are something else. Perhaps you are more than you realize. You have a place here should you choose it, as a member of this family." Aiden's heart skipped a beat. Her words hit him harder than he expected. Being called family by someone like Queen Solara was not something he ever imagined. It was a gesture of honor, but it was also a heavy responsibility. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "I'm just a human." Queen Solara's eyes narrowed, and her voice took on a more serious tone. "You are more than just a human. You are the one who saved the life of my daughter. That is something no Caribbean could ever forget." Aiden felt a lump form in his throat as he tried to process her words. Could it really be that simple? Did saving the princess mean that much to them? He had always been taught to value life, to do what was right. But this was different. This wasn't just about duty anymore. This was about something much larger, something he wasn't sure he was ready for. As the queen turned to leave the room, she paused for a moment, her eyes meeting his one last time. "You will remain here for now, Aiden. Learn our ways. You are part of this family now, whether you realize it or not." Aiden stood in the center of the room, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy cloak. His life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. And as the door closed behind the queen, Aiden couldn't help but wonder just how much deeper he would be drawn into the Caribbean world, and what that would mean for him and for his future. Aiden had never felt like an outsider quite like this before. As the days passed in the Grand Palace, he couldn't shake the sense that he was a fish out of water. The Caribbeans were proud, and their world was unlike anything he had ever known. Still, Queen Solara's words haunted him, echoing in his mind. "You are part of this family now." He had no idea what that really meant. Was it just a gesture of gratitude, or was the queen serious? He had saved Princess Vereth's life, yes, but that wasn't something that automatically made him a family member, was it? It had been a week since the crash, and Aiden had spent most of that time trying to adjust. His meals were strange but delicious, and the Caribbean palace was a maze of alien architecture that felt cold, yet oddly welcoming. He spent his days walking through the gardens, learning the basics of Caribbean customs and speaking with those who lived and worked in the palace. But the more he learned, the more he realized how little he truly understood. The Caribbeans had their own way of life, their own traditions and their own values, ones that were so different from everything he had grown up with on Earth. One evening, after a long day of lessons in Caribbean language and etiquette, Aiden found himself in the royal courtyard. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the palace grounds, and the air smelled of sweet, fragrant flowers that seemed to only bloom under the Caribbean sky. Aiden wasn't used to feeling lost in his thoughts. He had always been confident in his decisions, but now everything felt uncertain. He wasn't sure where he stood in the palace. Was he still just a soldier? Or was he truly becoming part of something bigger? He hadn't spoken to Queen Solara since the day the princess was rescued, and he didn't know what to make of the Queen's offer. Just as he was about to turn and head back to his quarters, he heard a soft voice behind him. "You look lost in thought," said Princess Vereth, her voice gentle but strong. She stood a few paces away, her golden armor catching the fading light. Her pale, shimmering skin seemed to glow in the sunset, and her violet eyes held a curious expression. Aiden turned around, startled. "I didn't hear you coming." "I'm not surprised," she said with a smile. "The Caribbeans are good at moving quietly, but I noticed you've been quiet lately too." Aiden rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "I'm just trying to get used to everything here. It's a lot to take in." Vereth nodded. "I understand. It's not every day that a human finds himself in the royal palace of Carivia. I'm sure it's overwhelming. Aiden hesitated. You don't mind me being here? The princess smiled softly. I'm grateful you saved my life. I think the queen is too. But I'm curious. Why did you do it? Why risk your life to save me? Aiden met her gaze, his heart skipping a beat. He had asked himself the same question many times, but somehow it was easier to talk about it with her. I guess I couldn't just leave you behind, he said slowly. Back on Earth, we don't turn our backs on people who need help, no matter who they are. I didn't think twice about it. The princess looked thoughtful, her eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and something else, perhaps surprise. You're very different from what I expected, she said, stepping a little closer. Aiden didn't know how to respond. The princess had been raised in a world of power and duty, a world where even the smallest misstep could cost someone their life. He was a soldier, yes, but he had always fought for something bigger, an ideal, a sense of right and wrong. He hadn't grown up with a royal lineage or the weight of an entire civilization on his shoulders, yet here he was in the palace of an alien empire, being treated like one of their own. I didn't expect any of this, Aiden said, his voice quiet. I didn't expect you either. Virith's smile widened. You thought I would be, like the others, didn't you? Cold, unfeeling? Aiden looked away, embarrassed. Maybe a little. I've heard stories about how the Carivians rule with strength and distance. The princess tilted her head. You've heard the stories, but they don't tell the whole truth. Carivians are proud, yes, but we are also loyal to those we care about, to those we choose as family. Aiden's heart skipped a beat. Family? Virith's gaze softened. My mother, Queen Solara, is not like most rulers. She has a strong will, yes, but she also values those who prove themselves worthy. You saved my life, Aiden. That makes you more than just a guest here. The words hung in the air, and Aiden felt a weight settle over him. He didn't know how to respond. What did it mean to be part of this family? What did it mean for him, a human, to be part of an alien royal family? Before he could voice his thoughts, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. The queen herself. Aiden, Queen Solara said, her voice like music, yet filled with authority. I see you're getting along with my daughter. Aiden straightened instinctively, unsure of how to behave around the queen. The princess stepped aside, giving Aiden some space. Your Majesty, Aiden said, trying to sound respectful. Queen Solara's gaze lingered on him, her silver eyes sharp and perceptive. I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, Aiden. You have proven yourself worthy of more than just our gratitude. I believe you are destined to play a key role in the future of our people. Aiden swallowed. What do you mean? The queen stepped closer, her voice lowering. Carivia is at a crossroads, and I do not believe it is an accident that you saved Virith. There are forces within the Empire that are seeking to tear us apart. You are here for a reason, Aiden, and whether you realize it or not, you are now part of this family. You have a role to play. Aiden's mind raced. A role to play? Was he prepared for that kind of responsibility? His life was already more complicated than he could have imagined, and now it seemed that his connection to the Carivians was only deepening. Queen Solara's eyes softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. You will learn more in time, Aiden. For now, know this. You are not alone. You are family. Aiden stood in silence as the queen and princess left the courtyard. His heart was heavy with uncertainty. He hadn't asked for any of this, but now it seemed that his fate was entwined with the Carivian royal family. And no matter how much he resisted, there was no turning back. The days that followed were filled with both tension and growth. Aiden had tried to settle into his new life in the Carivian palace, but each day seemed to bring a new challenge. Queen Solara's words still echoed in his mind. You are family, now. He wasn't sure what that meant, but there was no denying that he was bound to this world, this family, in ways he couldn't fully understand. His relationship with Princess Virith had grown too. No longer just the soldier who saved her life, he was becoming her trusted confidant and friend. She had shown him parts of Caribbean culture, taught him their customs, and even shared the stories of their people's ancient history. But the peace that had settled over the palace was fragile. Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something dark. The first signs of trouble came in the form of whispers. At first they were subtle, an uneasy glance, a hushed conversation in a hallway. But it didn't take long for Aiden to realize that not everyone in the royal court was pleased with his presence. Some of the guards who had once treated him with polite indifference now seemed to watch him closely. The palace servants were equally distant, their eyes shifting away when he passed. No one said anything outright, but Aiden could feel it, a growing tension, like a storm on the horizon. One evening, as Aiden was walking through the palace gardens with Princess Virith, the air heavy with the scent of alien flowers, she spoke to him quietly. "You sense it too, don't you?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. Aiden nodded. "Something's not right. I can feel the unrest in the air. Is this normal for your people?" Virith hesitated, looking around before answering. "No, this is not normal. Carivia has always been a kingdom of strength, but in the past few months there have been rumors. Dissent. A growing movement that seeks to overthrow my mother." Aiden raised an eyebrow. "Overthrow the queen? Why would anyone want to do that?" Virith's face darkened. "My mother's reign is firm, and not everyone agrees with her decisions. There are those who believe we should be more aggressive in our expansion, more ruthless in our control over the neighboring systems. And then there are those who want to see the monarchy dismantled entirely. They want a new order." Aiden felt a chill run down his spine. "And you think they're planning something against the queen?" "Yes," Virith said. "They've been working in the shadows, gathering support. My mother doesn't know how deep it runs yet, but I fear it's only a matter of time before it escalates. Some of the nobles have already begun to voice their discontent openly." Aiden clenched his fists. "What can we do?" Virith looked at him, her expression both sad and determined. "We have to stop them before they act. If they succeed, it will tear Carivia apart. The peace we have worked so hard to maintain will be lost, and my mother's life, our entire way of life, will be at risk." Aiden didn't hesitate. "Then we fight. We protect your mother, and we stop this movement before it's too late." The princess gave him a faint smile, but it was clear that the weight of what they were about to face rested heavily on her shoulders. "I knew I could count on you, Aiden. But you should know, the people behind this rebellion are not just noblemen and soldiers. There is something darker at work. I fear it's more than just a power struggle." Aiden felt a knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "There are whispers of an ancient faction," Virith said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A faction that was thought to be extinct. The Luric." Aiden's brow furrowed. "The Luric? Who are they?" Virith glanced around nervously as if making sure no one was listening. "The Luric were once a powerful group of Carivians, skilled in both magic and warfare. They were believed to have been wiped out centuries ago, but some say they've survived in secret, waiting for the right moment to strike. They want to overthrow the monarchy and return Carivia to its true ways." Aiden's mind raced. "Magic? Is that even real?" Virith nodded. "It is. Carivians once had great power, but it was lost over time. Most Carivians no longer believe in magic, but there are those who still practice it in secret. The Luric are said to be the last of those who wield it." Aiden had always believed in science and technology, and in the tangible world around him. But he had seen enough on this alien planet to know that not everything could be explained by logic. Still, the idea of magic, of ancient powers hidden within the walls of this palace, was enough to make his skin crawl. As the two of them continued walking, Aiden noticed a group of soldiers approaching. They were led by General Kalen, the head of the royal guard. Kalen was a tall, imposing figure with sharp features and an air of authority that seemed to command respect. But there was something in his eyes, a coldness that Aiden didn't like. "Princess," Kalen said with a slight bow, though there was little warmth in his voice. "The Queen requests your presence. There is urgent business." Virith nodded, her expression serious. "Thank you, General. I'll be there shortly." Kaelin's gaze shifted to Aiden, and for a moment the two men locked eyes. Aiden could feel the tension between them, though Kaelin's expression remained neutral. "I trust you're finding Carivia to your liking, human," he said, his voice edged with sarcasm. Aiden didn't flinch. "I'm getting used to it." Kaelin's lips curled into a tight smile before he turned and walked away, his soldiers following in formation. "What was that about?" Aiden asked, his brow furrowing. Virith sighed, her eyes watching the retreating soldiers. "General Kaelin doesn't trust you. He doesn't trust anyone who isn't Carivian. I've tried to smooth things over, but I fear there's more at play here than just loyalty." Aiden didn't like the sound of that. He had saved the princess's life, and yet there were those who looked at him like an outsider, like a threat. And with the rebellion growing, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Carivian royal family was in more danger than ever before. The rebellion, the lyric, General Kaelin's mistrust, it all pointed to one thing. The Carivian monarchy was on the edge of a storm, and Aiden was standing in the middle of it. "Whatever happens," Virith said, breaking Aiden's thoughts, "we'll face it together." Aiden nodded, the weight of their mission heavy on his shoulders. The fate of the Carivian kingdom rested in their hands, and the darkness they were about to face was far more than just political. It was a battle for the soul of the empire, and no one knew who would emerge victorious. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and growing tension. Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. Princess Virith had warned him of the dangers ahead, the rebellion, the lyric, the power struggle within the royal court. But nothing had prepared him for what came next. It started one evening as Aiden walked through the palace corridors, his mind still tangled with the plans he and Virith had discussed earlier. The walls of the palace were covered in intricate designs, symbols that told the story of the Carivian people, but none of that helped ease the tightness in his chest. There was a storm coming, and he could feel it in his bones. The palace was eerily quiet that night. The usual bustle of servants and guards seemed absent, as if the air itself had been drained of life. Aiden paused, his senses on high alert. That's when he heard it, the sound of heavy footsteps approaching from behind. He spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side, only to relax when he saw who it was. General Kaelin stood before him, his face as cold and impassive as ever. "I see you're getting comfortable here, human," Kaelin said, his voice low and laced with a hint of mockery. "Perhaps too comfortable." Aiden straightened, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want, Kaelin?" The general's lips curled into a thin smile. "I just wanted to remind you that you are not one of us. You may have saved the princess, but that doesn't make you Carivian. Remember your place." Aiden's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "I haven't forgotten my place." Kaelin stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Aiden's face. "Good, because you're not as welcome here as you think. There are those who believe you're a threat, and they're watching you." Aiden's mind raced. "Are you one of them?" Kaelin's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm just a soldier following orders. But I suggest you keep your distance from the princess. She may think she's found a new family in you, but don't fool yourself. She's the heir to the throne, and the throne doesn't belong to you." Before Aiden could respond, Kaelin turned on his heel and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Aiden stood there for a moment, his mind racing with the implications of their conversation. What was Kaelin trying to tell him? And why did it feel like every word that came out of his mouth was a threat? The uneasy feeling in Aiden's chest deepened. The rebellion was real. And Kaelin wasn't the only one who saw Aiden as an outsider. He was beginning to realize that no matter how much the Carivian royal family accepted him, there would always be those who viewed him as a danger to their way of life. The next day, the tension in the palace reached a breaking point. Aiden had spent the morning training with the royal guard, learning the basics of Carivian combat techniques. While the training was exhausting, It allowed him to focus, to push aside the growing feeling of unease that had been following him. But that afternoon, everything changed. A message arrived for Princess Virith. It was delivered by one of the palace attendants, a nervous-looking woman who barely made eye contact as she handed the letter to the princess. Virith's face went pale as she read the contents of the message, her hands trembling slightly. Aiden was by her side in an instant, his heart racing. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Virith's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "It's from my mother. There's been an attack. A rebellion group led by General Kalen has taken control of one of the palace's outer forts. They've declared their intention to overthrow the monarchy. They want to take Karivia for themselves." Aiden's stomach churned. "Kalen? He's leading the rebellion?" Virith nodded. "He's more dangerous than I realized. And it's worse than just a political coup. He's being backed by the Luric. They've joined forces and now they're ready to strike at the heart of the kingdom." Aiden's mind raced. "What can we do?" "We need to act quickly," Virith said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "If we don't move now, it'll be too late. The rebellion will be too strong and my mother will fall." "I won't let that happen." Aiden didn't hesitate. "I'm with you. What do we need to do?" Virith placed the letter down and looked him in the eyes. "We need to gather loyal soldiers, those who still stand with the crown. We'll make our way to the fort and confront Kalen and the Luric before they can take control of the rest of Karivia." The plan was dangerous. Aiden knew that, but he also knew that there was no turning back. He had become part of this family, whether he wanted to or not. And now, the price of that was clear. The future of Karivia, and the woman he had come to care for, was at stake. As the hours passed, Aiden and Virith worked quickly, gathering those they could trust and preparing for the journey to the fort. The palace was in chaos, with soldiers scrambling to prepare for battle and the royal advisors offering plans of their own. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone knew that this was a fight for the future of the Karivian Empire, and no one knew how it would end. By the time they reached the outer fort, the sky was dark with the clouds of an impending storm. The wind howled, carrying the scent of dust and the promise of danger. Aiden's heart raced as they approached the forts. Walls, the sounds of battle already echoing through the air. Virith turned to him, her face set in determination. "Stay close to me," she said. "We can't afford to lose anyone." Aiden nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. He wasn't just fighting for Karivia anymore. He was fighting for Virith, for the family that had taken him in, and for the future that still hung in the balance. The battle was just beginning, and Aiden knew that whatever happened next, it would change everything. The storm was closing in, its fierce winds howling through the Karivian night. Aiden stood at the base of the fort's walls, his body tense and alert. The air was thick with tension, the kind of quiet that always precedes a battle. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the horizon. The fortress loomed ahead, its towering walls barely visible through the swirling dust and rain. Virith stood beside him, her face set with determination, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. She was no longer just the princess. She was a warrior in her own right, ready to fight for her people, for her family, and for the future of Karivia. "Are you ready?" Aiden asked, his voice steady despite the storm swirling around them. Virith nodded. "We have no choice. This is the moment we've been preparing for. We either stop Kalen and the Luric now, or Karivia will fall." Aiden glanced back at their small group of soldiers. The loyalty in their eyes was clear. They had pledged their lives to the crown and to Virith, and now they would fight to protect everything they held dear. The battle had already begun. The sounds of clashes, shouts, and the thundering of feet could be heard from within the fort. Kalen and his rebels were already entrenched, ready to defend their position with everything they had. "We move quickly," Virith said, her voice a low command. "We can't afford to waste any time." With that, they began their approach. Aiden and Virith led the way, their soldiers following closely behind. The fort was only a short distance away, but it felt like an eternity. Every step brought them closer to a fight that would decide the fate of Carivia. As they neared the fort's entrance, the first wave of enemy soldiers appeared on the walls above them. Their weapons gleamed in the dim light, and their eyes were filled with cold determination. Aiden could see Kalen standing among them, a tall figure with a commanding presence, his eyes locked on the approaching group. "There they are," a rebel soldier shouted. The battle began in an instant. Aiden and the Carivian soldiers sprang into action, their swords clashing with the rebels in a burst of steel and sparks. Aiden fought with everything he had, his training and instincts taking over as he moved through the chaos, protecting Virith and cutting down anyone who stood in his way. The air was filled with the sound of battle, metal against metal, shouts of defiance and the screams of the wounded. Aiden's heart raced as he fought, his body moving with a precision he hadn't known he was capable of. There was no time to think, only to act. His every movement was focused on survival, on keeping Virith safe, on stopping Kalen before it was too late. Virith was at his side, her sword flashing as she fought with the same intensity. She moved with the grace of a seasoned warrior, her every strike precise and powerful. Aiden couldn't help but admire her strength, even as they fought side by side. The bond between them had only grown stronger since the day he had saved her life. And now it was more than just friendship. It was loyalty. It was family. Kalen's voice rang out above the battle. "You think you can stop us, princess?" he shouted, his eyes cold with hatred. "Carivia belongs to the strong, not the weak. Your mother is too soft, too weak to rule. It's time for a new order." Virith's eyes narrowed as she locked eyes with the general. "Your rebellion will fail, Kalen. The Carivian people will not follow a man who betrays his own blood." Kalen laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "You are naive, princess. The people are already turning against you. They see your weakness, and they want change. They want a future where power is the only truth." Aiden's grip tightened on his sword, and he stepped forward, ready to fight. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. He could feel the weight of the battle, the responsibility of protecting the princess and the future of the Carivian people. But just as they were about to engage Kalen directly, something unexpected happened. A flash of light erupted from within the fort, followed by a deafening crash. A shockwave rippled through the ground, knocking Aiden off his feet and sending soldiers sprawling in every direction. "What was that?" Virith shouted, trying to steady herself. The ground trembled beneath them as the shockwave continued to roll outward, and Aiden quickly pushed himself up. "It's coming from inside the fort! They've unleashed something! Get ready!" Virith shouted. "We need to stop them now!" As the smoke and dust settled, a new figure appeared in the distance. A tall, dark figure cloaked in shadows, surrounded by a strange, flickering energy. The Lyric had arrived. Aiden's eyes widened. This was no ordinary soldier. The figure was cloaked in dark robes, and as they stepped forward, a powerful, unnatural energy pulsed from their body. It was clear now. This was the true threat, the one Virith had warned him about. The Lyric had returned, and their magic was real. The figure raised one hand, and the ground beneath them seemed to crack open, sending a wave of energy across the battlefield. Soldiers screamed as they were knocked off their feet, and even Aiden struggled to stay grounded. "Stay back," Virith shouted to her soldiers. "We have to take them down before they use that power against us." Aiden's heart raced as he watched the Lyric figure advance. This was unlike anything he had ever seen. The power emanating from the figure was terrifying, and the soldiers were no match for it. The Lyric were not just rebels, they were something far more dangerous. Kalen stood back, his eyes filled with something between awe and fear. The Lyric. They were supposed to stay hidden, he muttered, his voice shaky. Virith stepped forward, her sword raised. "This ends now, Kalen. You've made a grave mistake." The battle raged on, but now it was more than just a fight for control of the throne. It was a battle for the very soul of Carivia. Aiden knew they had to win, there was no other choice. This was the final stand, and everything depended on them, on him, on Virith. Together, they would face the storm. and no matter what happened, Aiden would protect his new family even if it meant giving everything he had.